welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into something pretty fundamental, actually, the core teachings of Buddhism.
That's right. We got a request. Well, you sent in that classic text, What the Buddha Taught, by Walpola Rahula.
Yeah, and the idea is to get a really clear, solid grasp of the main concepts.
Think of it as a shortcut, maybe, a way to get the essence without getting totally bogged down.
Exactly. We'll pull out the big ideas, maybe some surprising bits too, and we'll try to keep the jargon, manageable.
Definitely. So our plan is to start with the absolute foundation, the Four Noble Truths.
Okay.
Then we'll look at related stuff like Anatta, that no-self idea, and meditation.
And how it all fits into, the real world today.
Right. How these ancient ideas still apply.
Perfect. So whether you're familiar with this or it's completely new, we'll guide you through. Let's jump in. The Four Noble Truths.
Okay, so these four truths are really the bedrock. And the first thing Rahula points out, which is crucial, is that Buddhism is, realistic.
Not pessimistic.
Yeah.
Or overly optimistic either.
No, exactly. It's about seeing life as it is. And the first noble truth is dukkha.
Dukkha. Now, we usually hear that translated as suffering. But it's more complex than just, physical pain, isn't it?
No, much more, yeah. Dukkha covers, obviously, pain and hardship, but also that general feeling of unsatisfactoriness, things not being quite right.
Like a subtle background hum of meh?
Kind of, and also the fact that everything is impermanent, nothing lasts. Rahula talks about three types of experience: pleasant, painful, neutral.
Okay.
And then there are three aspects of dukkha itself. There's the obvious suffering, right?
Right.
Then there's suffering because things change, even good times end.
Right.
And maybe the deepest level is this kind of pervasive unease that comes just from being, conditioned beings.
Conditioned existence. Okay. What does that mean exactly? Does this tie into the idea of a self?
It absolutely does. Buddhism talks about the five aggregates. These are the components that make up what we think of as a person.
Right, like building blocks.
Sort of. They are. Matter, our physical body. Sensations, feelings. Perceptions, how we interpret things. Mental formations, thoughts, intentions, volitions.
Okay.
And consciousness, our awareness. The key point here is there's no separate, unchanging soul or spirit floating around apart from these.
No little ghost in the machine. No permanent me controlling it all.
Exactly. It's all interconnected parts, constantly changing. Flux. That's the word.
So no fixed thinker having the thoughts, just thoughts happening.
Pretty much. It's a continuous stream. Rahula even mentions how Buddhism sees life cyclically, without some absolute beginning point we can find.
Wow. Okay, that's a big shift from how many of us think. So how does understanding these aggregates help with dukkha, the first truth?
Well, the Buddha said, and Rahula quotes this, something like, seeing dukkha means you also see how it arises, how it ceases, and the path to its cessation.
So understanding the problem fully is the first step to seeing the whole picture, the solution too.
Exactly. Recognizing dukkha in this deep way, the impermanence, the unsatisfactoriness, is step one, not just the obvious bad stuff.
Now, hearing all this about suffering and impermanence,
Yeah.
it can sound a bit, depressing. Is Buddhism kind of gloomy?
That's a common misconception, and Rahula really tackles it. He stresses it's not about being miserable at all. He points out that dedicated Buddhists are often described as happy, calm, serene. Think about the Buddha himself, often called ever-smiling.
You have the powerful image, not what you might expect.
Right. And you read the early texts, like the verses of the monks and nuns, the Therigatha and Therigatha, and they're full of joy. Even outsiders, like a king mentioned in the text, noticed how peaceful and happy the disciples looked.
So acknowledging suffering isn't wallowing in it.
Not at all. Getting angry or upset about suffering is counterproductive. The idea is to understand it clearly, intelligently, and work with it patiently. Actually, joy piti is one of the factors of enlightenment.
Joy. Okay, that really flips the script. So dukkha is the starting point, the reality we need to understand. What's next? The second noble truth.
Yes, samudaya. This is the arising or the origin of dukkha.
And what's the culprit identified here?
It boils down to thirst or craving. The Pali word is tanha.
Thirst, like wanting things.
Yeah, but it's deeper than just wanting a new phone. It's this deep-seated craving for things to be different, for pleasure to last, for unpleasantness to go away, for a permanent self in a world that's always changing.
That sounds pretty familiar, like fundamentally human.
It is. And this thirst is tangled up with all sorts of passions and mental impurities. Rahula mentions the four nutriments here, too, which kind of fuel this whole cycle, both physically and mentally.
Okay, so this craving keeps the wheel turning, keeps us stuck in.
Exactly. It drives the cycle of continuity, what's called samsara. This thirst, combined with our actions, karma, and the whole process of rebirth, keeps generating dukkha.
So we have the illness, dukkha, and the cause, samadaya, this thirst. Is there a cure? The third noble truth.
Absolutely. Nirodha. This is the cessation of dukkha. It tells us there is liberation, there is freedom from this cycle.
And that liberation is nirvana.
Yes, nirvana. Rahula defines it primarily as the extinction of thirst, tanhakayo, also as detachment, viraga, which is seen as the highest state. It's freedom.
Nirvana. It's a word people throw around. Sometimes it sounds a bit like nothingness. Is it negative?
No, Rahula is very clear it's not negative. He lists synonyms used in the text like Shiva, auspicious, Kema, safety, Santi's peace. It's profoundly positive.
Okay, so how does it relate to reality? You mentioned Buddhism sees things as impermanent.
Right. Nirvana is presented as the absolute truth. But here's the twist. The absolute truth is that there is nothing absolute in the way we normally think. No permanent self, no unchanging substance. Everything is relative conditioned.
So the ultimate truth is the lack of any ultimate thing.
Precisely. Realizing that truth, seeing things as they really are, without that fixed self we project onto them, that's what extinguishes the craving. That's what stops dukkha.
Wow. That's quite a paradox. Realizing there's no fixed reality is the ultimate reality.
It is. Rahula also briefly notes the Mahayana perspective, which sometimes sees nirvana and samsara as ultimately not separate, different facets of the same reality, perhaps.
Okay, so the mind immediately asks, what happens after nirvana?
That question itself shows a slight misunderstanding, according to the teaching. Nirvana is the ultimate truth, the final liberation. There's no after in that sense. It's not a step towards something else.
Ah, okay. It's the end of the line. In a good way.
Yeah.
What about someone who attains it, an arahant? What happens when they die, parinirvana?
That's one of the unanswered questions, Avyakata. The Buddha suggested our normal language just can't grasp it. Terms like born or not born don't apply anymore because the five aggregates, the components of the being, are completely gone. They won't arise again.
Like a fire going out when the fuel runs out. That's the analogy, right?
Yes, but Rahula adds a really important clarification. It's the being the aggregates that's like the extinguished fire, not nirvana itself. Nirvana doesn't get extinguished.
Got it. That's crucial. Okay, another big question. If there's no permanent self, who realizes nirvana?
Think of it like this. Thought happens without a permanent thinker behind it, right? In the same way, wisdom panya realizes nirvana without needing a fixed self to do the realizing. The potential for cessation is inherent in the arising.
So the way out is built into the system itself, which leads perfectly to the fourth noble truth, magga, the path. How do we actually walk it?
Right, the path. Magga is the middle path, or the Noble Eightfold Path. Rahula stresses that compassion and wisdom are like the two wings needed to fly on this path.
The Eightfold Path, I've heard of that. It's broken down into sections.
Yes, usually into three main parts. First is ethical conduct, sila. This is grounded in universal love and compassion.
Okay, what does that involve?
It involves right speech, speaking truthfully, kindly, not gossiping, right action, not killing, stealing, engaging in sexual misconduct, and right livelihood, earning a living ethically without harming others.
This is like solid principles for living a good life.
Absolutely fundamental. The second part is mental discipline, samadhi. This is about training the mind.
How so?
It includes right effort, actively preventing negative states and cultivating positive ones. Right mindfulness, being aware moment to moment of your body, feelings, mind, thoughts.
That mindfulness piece seems key.
Hugely. And right concentration, developing focus, which can lead to deeper states of mental calm and clarity, sometimes called dhyana or trance states.
Okay, ethics, mental discipline. What's the third?
Wisdom panya. This consists of right thoughts free from greed and hatred, thoughts of nonviolence, love, renunciation, and seeing reality as it is, understanding the Four Noble Truths, understanding anatta.
And you said wisdom and compassion go together, so right thought isn't just intellectual.
Exactly. True wisdom inherently includes these qualities of love and nonviolence. They aren't separate. You need both head and heart.
Makes sense. So how do these four truths work together practically?
Rahula summarizes it with four functions. Dukkha needs to be fully understood. The origin of dukkha, that thirst, needs to be discarded, let go of. The cessation nirvana needs to be realized, and the path needs to be followed, cultivated.
Understand, let go, realize, practice.
Got it.
Yeah. And it connects back to that story of the Buddha hesitating to teach. He saw the world like a lotus pond, Some ready to bloom above water, some still deep under the mud. People are at different levels.
But he taught in no
Okay,
way.
he decided the path was worth sharing.
Okay, this brings us neatly to one of the trickiest concepts for many people, anatta. No soul, no self. Can you unpack that?
Right, anatta. It's definitely a big one. First, think about the usual ideas of soul or self, something permanent, unchanging, uniquely me, often tied to self-protection, self-preservation.
Yeah, that core feeling of I am.
Exactly. The Buddha's teaching on anatta was radical, really against the current, as Rahula puts it. It directly challenges that ingrained feeling.
It feels like it goes against basic intuition. It can feel that way. Understanding it involves both analysis, breaking down the self into those 5 aggregates again, and understanding conditioned genesis or dependent origination.
Which means?
Everything arises because of conditions. Nothing exists totally independently, yourself included. It's all interconnected. Rahula also mentions how this relates to free will and the idea of 2 truths.
2 truths.
Yeah, conventional truth, how we operate day to day, assuming stable objects and selves, and ultimate truth, the deeper reality of impermanence, interdependence, and no fixed self.
So conventional truth isn't wrong, it's just not the whole picture.
Exactly. It's useful, necessary for living, but the ultimate truth is different. And Rahula is very clear. The Buddha explicitly denied an eternal, unchanging self, or Atman.
But he didn't answer every metaphysical question, right? He was sometimes silent.
Right. His silence was often deliberate. Answering certain questions based on the false premise of a permanent self would just confuse things further.
So when I feel like me, what is that feeling, according to this?
It's described as more like a process, a constantly changing impression that arises from the interplay of those 5 aggregates. Like a wave, distinct for a moment, but just water moving.
Not a solid thing.
No. The aim is to see these aggregates, objectively just physical and mental processes happening, constantly in flux without projecting a solid, independent I onto them.
Okay, the inevitable question now. If there's no I, who gets the results of karma? Who experiences the good or bad consequences?
The teaching emphasizes conditionality. Actions create effects within that interconnected web. Think of ripples in a pond or dominoes falling. One action leads to consequences down the line within the stream of experience.
So it's the continuity of the process, not a fixed entity getting rewarded or punished.
That's a good way to put it. And crucially, Rahula stresses, Anatta isn't about nihilism, about saying nothing matters. It's presented as the truth, reality. Seeing it dispels the illusion of this imaginary self, which is a major source of our suffering.
Ah, so it's liberating, not depressing.
Exactly. Asanga, a later Buddhist philosopher, is quoted, "There is the fact of no selfness. It's about seeing clearly."
That's a key distinction. It's not I don't exist, but what I call I exists differently than I thought.
Perfectly put. Rahula also points out how translation issues sometimes confuse things like translating anatta as just impermanent. And he mentions the story of Vacchagotta, a wanderer who kept asking the Buddha these questions.
And the Buddha was silent sometimes.
Yes, because Vacchagotta was starting from a confused premise about self. Answering directly might have pushed him further into misunderstanding, either thinking the self exists or that it's annihilated. Neither is the Buddhist view.
That silence speaks volumes about the limits of words here.
It really does. And Rahula brings in the famous raft analogy. The teachings are like a raft to cross the river of suffering. Once you're on the other shore, you don't carry the raft around, right?
You let it go.
Right. Even clinging to the idea, I have no self, can be a fetter if it comes from that same old habit of thinking, I am. The goal is objective seeing, without projecting I or mine.
So understanding anatta means seeing the constantly changing interdependent nature of experience without needing a solid me in the middle of it all.
Exactly. Seeing things as they are. And this understanding, this wisdom, is cultivated through practice, which brings us to meditation or mental culture, Havana.
Meditation. Okay, people often picture someone sitting cross-legged, eyes closed, maybe in a cave.
Yeah, the stereotypes. Rahula clarifies that Buddhist meditation, Havana, isn't just about escaping the world or striking a pose. While postures can help, it's fundamentally about cultivating the mental culture.
Training the mind.
Yes, training attention, developing clarity, insight. And it's not just for retreats. It's meant to be integrated into daily life. There are 2 main branches.
Which are?
Samatha, developing tranquility, calm, concentration, and Vipassana, cultivating insight into reality, into impermanence, dukkha, anatta. Rahula highlights the Satipatthana-sutta, the discourse on the setting up of mindfulness, as really central here.
Mindfulness, that's everywhere now. What's the core practice? Like mindfulness of breathing?
Yeah.
And Anatta.
Anapanasati, yes. It's very foundational. It involves bringing awareness to the natural sensation of your breath, the in-breath, the out-breath.
Do you need a special cushion or posture?
Rahula says, while traditional texts mention specific postures, the key is being comfortable and alert. Sitting upright in the chair is perfectly fine. You just gently notice the breath without controlling it.
Sounds simple, but not easy.
Definitely not easy at first. The mind wanders, that's normal. Rahula acknowledges the initial difficulty, but with practice, concentration grows, bringing calm, even joy. And besides the deeper insights, it has immediate benefits: relaxation, better sleep, less stress.
A way to anchor in the present. And this mindfulness, it's not just for when you're sitting formally.
Absolutely not. A huge part is mindfulness of activities, bringing awareness to what you're doing as you do it. Walking, eating, working, talking.
Really being there for your life instead of being lost in thought.
Exactly. Living in the present moment. Rahula quotes the Buddha, explaining why his disciples look radiant. They do not repent the past, nor do they brood over the future. They live in the present.
That's powerful. But is it like constantly narrating, I am walking, I am lifting my foot? Isn't that awkward?
Good question. No, it's not self-consciousness. Ideally, it's more like losing yourself in the action, being fully present with the action without the I am doing this commentary.
Like being in the zone.
Yeah, there's a similarity. It also extends to mindfulness of sensations, noticing pleasant, unpleasant, neutral feelings as they arise and pass without getting swept away by them, just observing.
And mindfulness of the mind itself.
Yes. Being aware of your mental states, anger, calm, desire, confusion objectively without judgment. Like a scientist observing phenomena. Rahula notes that often, when you become mindfully aware of being angry, the anger itself starts to lessen.
Like shining a light on it.
Precisely. And meditation here also includes reflecting on the teachings, studying, discussing intellectual and ethical contemplation. He mentions a story where a conversation between monks led to deep realization. It's all part of padlana.
So it's both calming the mind and investigating it skillfully.
Exactly. Rahula lists the 5 hindrances to watch out for things like sensory desire, ill will, laziness, restlessness, doubt, and the 7 factors of enlightenment to cultivate.
Which are? Briefly.
Mindfulness, investigation of the Dhamma, teachings, energy, joy, relaxation, concentration, and equanimity. The key, he says, is a genuine wish to cultivate these.
It's a really comprehensive approach to mental training. Okay, final section. How does all this connect to the world today? Is Buddhism just for monks, or does it work for regular people with jobs and families?
Rahula tackles this directly. He firmly says the Noble Eightfold Path is for everyone, not just monastics.
That you don't have to run off to a monastery.
No. True renunciation isn't about physical location. It's about mental purity. He quotes Sariputta saying, someone in a forest with impure thoughts is worse off than someone in a village with a pure mind.
That makes sense. Your mind goes with you.
Exactly. And the Buddha himself apparently told Vacchagotta that many lay people, men and women living family lives, had reached high spiritual attainments. Rahula mentions figures like Anathapindika, a wealthy householder who was a major supporter and practitioner.
So, lay life is valued. Are there specific guidelines for lay people?
Yes. Texts like the Sigala Sutta outline duties and ethics in relationships. Parent-children, husband-wife, employer-employee, friends, lay people, monastics. It's about mutual respect and ethical conduct within society.
A kind of social ethics framework. How does one officially become a Buddhist then? Is there a ceremony?
Not really an essential one like baptism. Rahula explains it's fundamentally about understanding the teachings, having conviction, taking refuge in the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dhamma teachings, the Sangha community,
Right.
and following the 5 precepts.
Which are basic ethical rules.
Yes, like not killing, stealing, lying, engaging in sexual misconduct, or taking intoxicants. Traditional ceremonies exist, but the core is understanding and practice, not ritual.
Okay. Now, sometimes Buddhism gets criticized for being too focused on individual escape, ignoring social or economic problems. Is that fair?
Rahula argues no. While nirvana is the ultimate goal, the Buddha cared about human happiness here and now. Material well-being isn't the end goal, but it's recognized as often necessary for both happiness and having the space for spiritual practice.
So it's not anti-wealth, but advises using it wisely.
Exactly. There's advice on managing finances responsibly and descriptions of happiness for lay people that include economic security earned ethically. It's a means, not an end.
What about bigger issues? Politics, war, peace?
The Buddha had clear stances, strong advocacy for nonviolence, peace. Buddhism rejects the idea of a just war.
Really? No exceptions.
That's the principle. The Buddha himself reportedly intervened to prevent conflicts. He laid out the 10 duties of the king, ethical guidelines for rulers focusing on things like generosity, morality, honesty, kindness, nonviolence, patience.
10 duties for government. Sounds relevant today.
Very. Rahula explicitly connects these teachings to modern problems, like the threat of war and self-destruction. He quotes the Buddha on overcoming hate with love, saying the real victory is conquering oneself.
And he mentions Emperor Asoka.
Yes, the classic example. A powerful emperor who, after converting to Buddhism following a bloody war, renounced violence and ruled based on Dhamma principles. A historical case study, really.
It shows it's possible, at least.
It does. Rahula contrasts peace based on a balance of power, which is often rooted in fear, with true peace based on metta-loving kindness free from suspicion. The ultimate aim, he suggests, is a society that values peace, compassion, fairness, guiding people towards ultimate liberation.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground there, from the core problem of dukkha, through the path, the nature of self, meditation, and right up to its relevance today, all from that listener suggestion in Rahula's book.
Yeah, it's a dense but rewarding text. I think some key takeaways are definitely that realistic view of life in dukkha, the paradigm shift of anatta, and how practical mindfulness can actually be.
Absolutely. Hopefully this deep dive has given you, our listener, a useful map, a way to navigate these profound ideas without feeling lost. Maybe spark some aha moments.
We hope so. It's worth taking some time to just sit with these concepts, see how they might connect with your own experience, your own view of the world.
Definitely. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. If we really take on board this idea of impermanence, and maybe even the lack of a fixed, permanent self, how might that change how we approach our goals, our relationships, what we cling to in life?
That's a good one to ponder. Something to chew on until next time.
Until our next deep dive.